I wanted to move on to our presentation tonight. I had an opportunity to read some of Shami's published papers on project management and project orchestration in particular, and I thought after reading several of his papers that he would be a wonderful person to have tonight to speak on project orchestration. I really like the term project orchestration. It kind of like puts the leadership back into project management. As some of you know from reading the flyer, he's from Canada, so am I. He got here sooner than I did. I've been here since '98. He got here in '95. He recently did a master's in public administration in Iowa, correct? Right. And let's give a big round welcome to Shami.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. I think you may want to hold off on the applause till the end of the presentation. You may not think of me quite so kindly at the end of the day. I'm very honored, very pleased to be here presenting to you. Thank you for making the time and taking the time. I know there's a baseball game on today, so hopefully I'll be a little more entertaining or equally entertaining, but not quite as much as the guys that knock them out of the park. So we'll give it our best shot. I'm probably in a real legitimate job after about 30 years of consulting. I've been a consultant for a very long time. Project management, management consulting, building systems, solving business problems, those kinds of things. I have some business cards here. I work for a company called NetSmart Technologies. They are leaders in the healthcare, behavioral healthcare business, based out of Kansas City, with offices in several other places in the United States, and many clients, many products, very, very good company to work with. Give you a little bio on myself. I've been in the industry for about 30 years, 30 plus years. I had a company in Toronto, as Renee mentioned. I started a company there. Prior to that, I worked for Scotiabank, Bank of Nova Scotia. I have a company that we started here in Dallas in '95, ran that for about 10 years, and then moved on to a private practice. My company is called iZen, which stands for Zen in our language means intellect. So when, as a consultant, somebody hired me, they basically hired me and my brain, and that's what they got, good, bad, or whatever it was. Some things that I've done that may be of interest. We were a Microsoft Gold partner in Dallas, and I had an opportunity to work with their management, with the e-commerce committee. It was a select group of about 27 members across the world. As a small, medium business Gold partner, we probably were the only no-name branded company. We were amongst some very large companies like EDS and so on, and the experience was phenomenal. Meeting with Microsoft executives, traveling to various locations, offices that they took us to. I've done a little bit of teaching, systems analysis and design. I did that at Ryerson University in Toronto. It was a continuing education course, kind of the evening course, if you will. I've been half my life in the public sector, half in the private sector. So a lot of the experience that I have is kind of a mix of the two. I've done some nonprofit organizations as well, like Scholarship America out of Minneapolis. So moving on, and I'm sorry I'm going to have to wear my fancy Costco glasses to see my slides, so that's going to mess up my profile, but we'll just have to take the good with the bad. Of course, the wiki I treat as the Bible, along with every other student and professor. I know my professors hated anything I ever quoted from the wiki. They didn't think that was a legitimate source, but that's where the word project comes from. In plain language, I think what's important is that it's a collaborative enterprise, some research designed to achieve a particular goal or some aim. There are, of course, many projects. The ones that I'm most familiar with are business projects, especially as they relate to technology. That's where most of my experience has been. I would say in the last 20 years, it's shifted away from just a technology focus for its own sake and more onto meeting with business people who either have an idea that they want to try and take to completion, or they've got some technology issue that they're trying to deal with and they need some help in dealing with it, and that's typically when I've gotten involved. So project management then, I think if you look at a PMP definition or most definitions, it's a temporary endeavor, and the idea is to create a unique product or service as a result of the project. I think of project management a little bit, like a religion. Everybody's got their own definition of it, everybody's got their own spin of it, but at the end of the day, project management is what it is, depending on which book you read, and God knows there are thousands, and which certifications you take, and there are a whole bunch of certifications. You might be a PMP, or you could be running around with a black belt or a blue belt or a green belt or a yellow belt. I've lost track of belts, but at the end of the day, I think the job of the project manager is you have to get the job done. They bring you on, and the key deal is, here's the problem, solve it. That means you need to know a little bit about the domain, you need to know a little bit about the business, you need to know a little bit about the technology, you have to get the job done on a timely basis within budget, hopefully satisfy the client or the business person. Very easy to say that in words, and we find it very, very difficult to achieve. When I worked for Scotiabank, I started out as a programmer analyst, project leader, project manager. My director came to me and said, we're not doing these projects very well. We seem to do the work, we upset all the bankers, they don't like what they see, they don't like what they get, it's full of bugs, it's not working, you need to fix it. And I said, what would you like me to do? And he said, well, I think we need you to write a methodology. I said, well, you probably need to go to Booz Allen or one of those big guys and have them devise something. And he said, well, we already tried that. We want you to write one because you know what the bank's all about. You know what the people are like. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a guy from IBM, from the Federal Systems Development Group, and he's going to work with you to show you how a project is taken from start to finish. But I have to have you put a spin for the bank on it, because at the end of the day, we have to do this for the bank. So I essentially spent, I'd say, about 9 or 10 months developing a project methodology, a system development lifecycle methodology that started with the project, the phases, the guidelines, standards, end products, deliverables, what each was supposed to contain, how would you write them, what was the format for writing them. I mean, we took it down to a very specific way of getting it done, with starting, ending gates, points of handoffs. And what we learned at the end of the day is that the most important thing is requirements. You have to know what somebody wants. If you don't know what they want and you cannot express it well enough, you have a fundamental problem. And so in coming along this path for the last 30 years, I found the landscape had changed, but I don't know that we had solved the problem. So when I did my master's, something I had to do was to write papers on various things. And I got involved in thinking and writing a little bit like an academic, but with a practical background. And that got me into sort of this writing mode where I was putting together documents. And one of the documents I wrote was Project Orchestration. I think it was buried somewhere in me. And it started to kind of come out, and then I wrote it into a paper. So there was a reason that led to writing it. A lot of it had to do with the changing landscape. As I said, we came from a mainframe to a web-based environment. And many of the issues that we have today are the same issues that I hit 30 odd years ago. We have certifications, but when you talk to the people that provide the certifications or that are taking the certifications, they're not really experience-based. They're more based in terms of, this is how you do it by the book. And so the lack of experience kind of bothers me, because what we've done is we've taken mentoring out of the picture. When I was working in those days, I found a couple of guys, and I was like a shadow. I'd follow this friend of mine, Walter, everywhere. He was my project lead, and I would meet up with him so he could tell me, share with me insights that he had that I couldn't get anywhere else. So Walter and I would end up at the Palm Court Lounge at about 6 o'clock and drink some Molson Export Ale. And then on some napkins, he would draw out some stuff that I would take back to work the next day and kind of ponder over those. And that was some of the mentoring that we did. And it was probably some of the most invaluable advice or mentoring that I received. And I look for those kinds of individuals who can teach me how to write properly, who can teach me how to think properly, who can teach me how to design or architect properly. And for that, you need to work with a lot of different people that either you work for, people that are alongside you, or people that work for you who have a lot of knowledge to give you. So technical knowledge, domain knowledge is not something that we are very impressed with these days as if you're a project manager. You're supposed to be able to manage a project from start to finish, given these metrics, given these gates that you go in and out of, and when you hit this gate, then all of these things should be done. Well, if you don't have the domain knowledge of healthcare, or you don't have the domain knowledge of banking or of manufacturing or any one of those areas, how do you know when you're in trouble? I don't know how you know that. I probably have a little bit too much knowledge because of all the places that I've been and things that I've done, but there's a gray area where you need to know something about the subject area that you're tackling. I mean, if they told me to build a bridge, I know how to build a bridge because I know that I need to hire these people and I have to go through these checkpoints and these milestones and so on. But at the end of the day, if the bridge falls down because it doesn't have enough cement or decent enough footing, how would I know to test that out, or how would I know when I should have checked that? And technical knowledge is the same way. I can do functional modeling, I can do data modeling because of my training and because of the paths that I took. But a lot of that is not really present in many of the project managers. And I'm not talking about the guys that have been into managing .NET or Java products for 5 or 8 years. I'm talking about people that are pretty senior, that have 12, 15, 20 years of experience. They've lost some of that knowledge or some of that edge, which I think, going back to the premise, you have to get the job done. So motivating people, understanding what they're doing is either going to work or not work. There's got to be some litmus tests that you need. All projects are not equal. There are projects, I've built a second methodology, one for very large projects, one for smaller projects that were maybe 6 to 12 months, and then enhancements or maintenance type of releases. So they all have slightly different life cycles, and you have to understand the nuances of each to know how to deal with them. So painting by numbers is not my way of managing a project. I was working with a client, and they decided that they weren't really happy with what IT was doing, so they decided that the business was going to take over. After all, IT is generally common sense. You know, you can just wing it as long as you're a reasonably rational person. And so they let the business people decide what the IT people should do, how they should do it, just go carry it out. And I haven't heard of anything more ridiculous in my life, so I had to finally say, I don't think this is for me anymore. You know, we gave it a good shot, but I think I have to call it a day. As a professional, I have to say, I don't think I can legitimately continue on with this assignment. I have to walk away from it. And I think you have to know when you have to walk away from certain assignments. Of course, there's always the product du jour or the methodology du jour, and these days Agile. If you're not doing Agile, then there's something fundamentally wrong with you. Well, spelling Agile and doing Agile is not the same thing. The first question you have to ask is, do you have your requirements that you're going to base your stories on? Is the organization ready to accept Agile? Is it sophisticated enough to accept Agile? If you cannot understand a requirement from start to finish, how are you going to split it up into stories and tell little stories, and hopefully those stories will join together and turn into the large story that you hope that it needs to become? So people are looking for a way to get it done using some kind of a panacea, and I, in over 30 years, I haven't found one. It's just a lot of hard work. I don't know if some of you remember this little bowl of cereal is called Bits and Bytes. And I kind of look at that as a project. Every time I put my hand in that box, I come up with a whole new deal. You know, none of these projects looks the same. So you have to analyze each in order to figure out what it is that you want to do. So there is no single solution that you can apply that applies to all projects. You have a lot of options in terms of technology, in terms of how do you go about doing the business. IT had matured to the point where information management was considered a key resource and a key deal, that they invited you to the round table along with the CFO and the COO and the CEO, and so you got the CIO and the CTO, and you were now sitting at the round table having dialogue with other executives, working with them. And if you read any of these magazines, they'll tell you as a CIO, you must understand the client's business. Well, then you get something like Sarbanes-Oxley that comes along, or SOX as it's known. They decided that a lot of systems had very poor financial controls. So if you think about it, IT started by working for finance and admin. The finance people were using calculators, and then they said, well, I can't do a payroll, or I can't do an accounting system on a calculator, and so we ended up with IBM 360s and Hewlett Packards and digital, and so it got bigger, but we were under the CFO's wing, finance and administration. Eventually we pulled away where we had an identity. So when Sarbanes-Oxley came along, the financial people said, you know, it's these idiots in IT. They don't understand what we're doing. They're doing a rotten job. What we need to do is to yank these guys right back under the financial wing, and then we'll control these guys because they're an expense, and we need to get better value out of these folks. So rather than putting us in a position where we can actually provide input, value, advice, they just said, no, you know, you guys really aren't very good. You really don't know your stuff. I think we're going to have to mentor you some more. So they kind of yanked the rug from under us and pulled us back. If you look at organizations that are doing well, I think you're going to find the people in IT have a voice that is heard. If you are looking at organizations that are not doing particularly well, I think you're going to find that IT doesn't have much of a voice. At least that's been my experience. And I'm happy to take questions. I'm happy to take debate. My problem is, like Jackie Gleason, I have a big mouth. And I don't mind opening it. And if somebody wants to push back, they're more than welcome to do that. And, you know, sometimes my clients don't like what I say, but at the end of the day, I'm going to give you the best advice that I can. Having been a consultant, I worked on the basis, I take $1, I do at least $1.10's worth of job. If that's not good enough for you, then I'll just peddle my wares somewhere else. I'm okay with that. And so for me, it was a very honest relationship, and so I spoke my mind and I told people what it is that they needed to hear. And when they didn't, I just said, okay, I guess I got to move on. And that's fair enough. It's their money, and you know, they ought to decide what to do with it. The next, did I hit it right? Okay. Anyway, I think I've talked through most of this. So where I started was, as I said, with the IBM days and the introduction of formality, life cycles. We had a waterfall technology, waterfall methodology. There were gates between phases. Benefits measurement was very important. How do you know you're going to get results that will provide benefits, and what is the return on investment? Those were, that was kind of what was important back in the 70s and the early 80s. I moved on to something called information engineering, where the technology approach changed to the extent that it became architected systems. And so we focused on what do you do and what do you not do. What do you do is what we would model as a function, set of functions, and what you didn't do basically stayed off the table. So I got used to doing functional and data modeling to find out what the client did, taking it down to a level of detail where we could demonstrate that these are the business processes that the client does, and here is the information that they use to do it with. Develop functional models and data models, and out of that would then emerge different types of architectures. An application envelope that would say, I need a general ledger and accounts receivables and a payable, order entry, and so on. You would end up with databases where you would have an accounting database and subject databases within that. And then you would have an architecture. Do you want to implement it on a mainframe, on a mid-range, on a PC? Of course, that came a little later. But we also employed something called case tools, or tools that helped you develop these models. And sometimes they would generate COBOL code or something of that nature. Fourth generation languages became very important because they allowed people to create programs, reports, and things like that very quickly. But we were still mired in individual vendors like IBM Digital and so on. And I think at that time, Oracle was just only a database. What you see on the picture there is essentially in developing a strategic plan for a business, You would develop a business model, you would look at the current systems, you would look at the strategies and priorities, and then from that, you would develop a migration strategy of how do I go from where I am to where I want to be, and what are the paths, what are the, what are the different steps that I need to take to get there. This is again a very similar information engineering model for those people that have studied James Martin. As I said, you do a functional model, a data model, and you come out of that with databases and different types of architectures. And there were a lot of planning tools available. And then this is the information engineering process where you have the business, the definition of things that are important to the business in the first line, and then beyond that is a method of how do you take that and architect that into a solution. So if you take a checkpoint, we've got now architected driven solutions, and that's what the project manager needs to be able to manage. But you've still got some significant problems. They still have not changed because I still remember projects that would fail. 70–80% of projects would never see the light of day. And we seem to have the ability not to do it right the first time, but we seem to have enough time and money to do it over and over again. When you go to a business and you say, this is going to take a year and X amount of money, the first response is, that's too long and that's way too much money. Okay, we're going to come to the triangle in a little while where, you've got cost and resources and functionality, and that's the famous triangle, but we've added a little more to it. The problem is, you're given a job to do as a project manager or as a senior person, but then you're not given the resources, you're not given the authority over what you need to do. Yes, you can deal with the project sponsor, you can deal with a steering committee, but you weren't really given the responsibility and the authority, but you were held accountable when something didn't work because your decisions were overruled or overridden by somebody else. Again, I'm revisiting some changes that have happened in the landscape, but we got into decentralization where you got into more departmental computing, and the marketing department said, I've got money, I can do what I want. I've got PCs, I've got a bunch of people I can hire, I can go ahead and do this. And if they got the okay from the executive, then they would go ahead and do that. The problem with this, the problem with this is that now you have pockets of information and pockets of data all over the enterprise. You have some enterprise system, and then you've got all these departmental systems. When they didn't work, they threw them back at the IT and said, well, that's your job, you fix it. Well, we didn't we didn't begin those projects. So you take it over and you look at the disparity of all of these technologies and things that get thrown at you and say, how am I supposed to pull all this stuff together? I always relate to this Star Wars scene where the ship is going through and it's getting rocks and all this stuff thrown at it, and it hits warp 9, and then suddenly you go zot and you're into this beautiful clean space with stars. I wish there was a way to do that in IT, but I haven't found it yet. We're still in the middle of some of this junk in space. I wanted to spend a few minutes on Agile, and my reason for doing that is that it's the same style of development, but morphed because now you want to not wait a year until the final product comes out. You want information faster, or you want functionality faster. And in the web world, I understand, in the internet world, yes, I understand that we need it much faster. But you And when I talk about the fact that as an organization, you must have the sophistication to deal with it, the situation you have is hopefully you've developed the overall story that says, and let me give you a simple example. Let's say we're making a salad. I should know what the salad is supposed to consist of at the end of the day. I mean, I got lettuce and I got tomatoes and I got this and I got the dressing and all that. Okay. Hopefully we've got the picture right. So then what they're saying is cut the salad, wash the salad, throw it in the bowl, and go that far. Okay, we got the lettuce done. All right, let's hit the tomatoes. Okay, we hit the tomatoes next. And then they said, all right, hit some celery after that. So, okay, we got there, but now the lettuce is wilting. So they said, okay, the lettuce is wilting, go back, clean out the lettuce, put some more fresh lettuce in and start again. In the Agile world, what you have is you've got a partial solution, and then you add on to the solution. But while the people are working with a partial solution, they find there's a problem. Something is not right. So you now have people in production working on a solution. They've added something more to the solution. Now they're going back to fix the original solution. And what you've got is a risky proposition where you don't have a lot of stability. So unless you really have this process really, really refined, and the business people and the technical people really know how to work it, it's not going to be provide a very satisfactory result. I still think the bottom line is, if you don't have that part done, and you don't know what the overall story is, you don't know what business you're in, you don't know what information is critical for you, then all of these partial stories are not really going to work out. I could probably get a lot of debate on people that are masters in Agile. With web-based computing, I think the biggest problem is it is at the speed of a click. They want it done about that fast. What you've done is you've taken the power of telecommunications and you've provided a lot more capability through centralized systems and decentralized capability. Everybody's looking for higher profits, lower cost. Well, you know where you're going to find the lower cost. It is going to be in countries or in people that are not charging as much as North America and Europe. Well, so now you've got a political problem. The government can't take advantage of it, or ostensibly can't take advantage of it, even though they do. One of the ways they're getting away from cost is by saying, all right, we'll go for open source. So I did a project for a company, and the CIO insisted he wanted open source. So I said, all right, you are an Oracle-based company, let's look at Oracle, and now you want to go open source. And that probably goes back about 5 or 6 years. And so open source was a little early in the game. With Oracle, if something doesn't work, you have one throat to grab, and you can get an answer. If you were using open source, given the number of products that you want to use, and you could be using Linux or whatever, you've now got half a dozen or more products, and if something doesn't work, where are you going to go for help? Well, yes, you can go to the community. What is your timeline for waiting until you get help from the community? Well, you're not important in their minds because they're developing products and they're doing what they're doing. So you have to come up with people that have the understanding and have the expertise to deal with these products. Where are you going to find those people? And how much training are you going to give them, and how much work are they going to have to do before you tackle your enterprise project that we're on? And comparing the risk of that to the cost of going with, whether it's Oracle or IBM or whoever, in this case it just happened to be Oracle, I said, you're a nonprofit organization, get them to cut you a deal, or I'll get them to cut you a deal, and then your cost is not going to be that far out of line. And that's what we eventually did. But that was 4 or 5 years ago. Open source is more relevant today, but I still don't know that we have quite the standards, because in terms of organizations that are supporting it, I don't know that we have organizations. If you go back 40 years, you had the ANSI, COBOL standards, or you had other kinds of standards. We don't have those kinds of organizations today that have those standards in place for all of the products that are out in open source. And do they play well with each other, or do they not play well with each other? It's debatable. So my only point is, there's no problem in using these products, but please understand the risk. And as a project manager, I think it is incumbent on you to explain to your management, to explain to the people that are spending the money, that there is a cost associated with making these decisions. I think as a project manager today, given all of these products, given all of these nuances that you have out there, very difficult job. You have to have a certain amount of breadth and depth of knowledge to be able to know how you're going to manage this kind of an environment. So that's when I came up with this word, project orchestration, that kind of tickled Renee's fancy. And of course, I looked at Leonard Bernstein's definition of what music orchestration is, and I kind of swapped some words out. So I think in my article I give credit to Mr. Bernstein, but you really are a bit of a conductor, because if you're given a product that you have to customize for a client, or you're given an application that you have to develop, you have to know what is the architecture that you're going to use, what are the products that you're going to use, and then where are you going to find the people that have that expertise and are going to be willing to work with each other. So it takes a lot of juggling to make that happen. And so I kind of like this picture of a fractal. I've got a math background, so I can't get away from math, but it's a concept that repeats itself. So when I look at a project, I think of a project that you can break down into its components, which you break down further into components until you've got manageable pieces, and then all those pieces roll back up to give you the total solution that you're looking for. And if all of these are defined well, as they are in this fractal picture, then I think you've got the ability to complete the job well. So I talked about this triangle earlier on, where you've got scope, resource, and cost. And that's the typical one, because if management says, I'm not going to give you that much money, then you're down to reducing the cost, which means this is not an equilateral triangle anymore. You've got a skewed triangle. If you lose a key resource, that's going to skew the triangle. Typically what happens is you start the project and they say, oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you. And that's when the scope increases, and they say, yeah, but this should be no big deal, just get them to work a little harder, a little smarter, and that'll work. And they're all full-time staff, we'll give them some comp time off. We don't pay overtime around here, so at least those are many of the environments that I've been in, and that doesn't really work. So I added another piece to it called risk. And there are many kinds of risks. There are risks of adding too many people, taking people away, shifting people at the last minute because either they want to leave, or you think you want to move them to a better job after you've just finished training them for 3 months on something. But this has a significant effect. So now you've got this fully expressed figure that you can yank out of proportion depending on what changes. And the job that I am given most often is one where the executive is having a shower and decides, oh, that would be a brilliant idea. So he walks into work and says, find me somebody to talk to. I got this brilliant idea. And then they want to take that brilliant idea and roll it out at some point. Or you walk into a situation where it's toxic. And they're saying, can somebody please get rid of this problem? I never want to see it again. Find me somebody that will take ownership and will just make it go away. And those are the two types of situations that I land in, which makes sense as a consultant. You either get to do something new because they can blame you if it doesn't work, or you get to take over something that is really messed up. And I like the messed up ones because if I do anything positive, it looks really good. If you make even a marginal improvement, people say, well, this guy's good, you pay him enough. So I kind of like those situations because I can't do anything but make it better. And if it doesn't work, I can just throw up my hand and say, guys, this thing is really dead. I've tried all the currents and everything. I can't raise the dead body. Tell you what, here's some ideas. And by then, management is willing to listen to any cockamamie idea that you come up with, and you can get them to buy into stuff, and now you've got yourself a whole new project. So, you can't lose. And anyway, that's my experience. I love those projects. So then, in a new environment, what's a project structure that would make sense? The one I like is where you have a project manager and you've got people with subject matter knowledge, people that understand the business. And I don't care where they come from. They could come from the business, they could come from technology side. You've got a technical architect who really understands how all the moving parts fit together, at least from a technology standpoint. And I can tell you that it really makes a difference because there are technologies that absolutely do not play well together and others that do. And so having somebody that you can go to and say, can you make this work? Yes or no? And if the answer is no, you look for something else. And then you need a business team. The question is, who's running it? I work on the basis, if you want me to run a project, then I want to run it. Good, bad, or ugly, you can hang me out to dry. I'm okay with that. But if you want me to run the project and you touch it, then you're going to take ownership of it. You either don't touch it and let me run it, or if you're going to tell me what to do, then you own the project, I don't own the project. And I'm not responsible for it. Can't get away with it all the time. You have to be a little subtle about how you express that. But like I told you, I got a big mouth, and I'm going to let them know that I am not buying into something where they tell me what to do, because then I can't deliver. I'm never going to satisfy them. So all of these become very important, and they will absolutely make or break a project. I've had projects where the executive sponsor was so much on side that I couldn't do anything to wreck the project. I mean, he was absolutely with me and had my back. I mean, those are just wonderful situations to be in. When I drove them into meetings and into finding out what they did and so on, and one of his directors said, yeah, call me and we'll figure it out. He just said, I got my book out. I'm putting down the dates. I suggest you boys do the same because we're paying him a lot of money. And if you're not willing to do that, then this is a waste of time. And I don't think it's a waste of time. Well, that solves the problem right there. So when you end up in those situations, you say, listen, I understand you don't want to do this. Let me call Tim and see what he thinks about it. Well, never mind, we'll just do it. So you kind of cut all that out. Here's a few answers or takeaways that I think you might find interesting. First one is, if you want to be a project manager and get hired, and you're going to find a recruiter that doesn't understand project management, that's a bad way to get a job. You have to get hired by people that actually understand what they want done, what you can do, and are willing to spend some time with you. But this business of throwing jobs out, throwing resumes against it, and having somebody assess whether you're close enough or not, I don't think that's going to provide very good candidates. But unfortunately, from what I see in the industry, there's a high demand and a high number of people looking for jobs, and they're just throwing them into the pool and saying, I hope something good comes out of it. I don't personally care for it. I think it's a bad way to do it. I think a PM, a project manager, I appreciate what the PMP certification does and what all these belts do, but I think I've spoken to PMPs that have experience and that don't have experience. I think you got to have experience. I don't discount the certifications, but when somebody says, if you don't have a PMP, I'm not going to hire you, that's fine. That's their choice. I think, you know, they're overlooking a lot of talent out there that doesn't have the time or the wherewithal to go get these certifications. Driving or passive PMs. I'm a driving PM, I'm not a passive PM. I don't manage things by metrics. If I'm in a client situation, I walk around. I walk around and see what people are doing. I want to know whether somebody's got a happy smile on their face or whether they got a wrinkle. I want to see what they look like when they're working on something. I stop in and chat about probably nothing. But at the end of the day, I want to get a feel for the individual and, you know, how they're performing. Just running it by numbers and saying, okay, I'm a third of the way through, I don't have so much done, that means I'm going to miss this, and here's my slack time, and here, it's okay to do the number crunching, but you gotta, you know, this is a people-oriented business. This is not strictly a technology-oriented business. I think risk-taking is very important. I remember telling a client, you want to get the system done. If you bid it out, it's going to be $3.5 million. If you want me to do it, it'll cost $2 million. She said, why? I said, because I'm doing it with your staff and I don't have to have the 40% margin or $1 million liability contract, because we don't have to do it. We'll just do it with your staff and we'll hire a couple of key people and get it done. And she said, why would I trust you? I said, well, I've done 3 projects for you that were in the tank. They were headed south real fast and we got those saved. And each one of those projects was worth anywhere from $5 to $7 million. So on the basis of that, if you don't want to trust me, that's okay, it's your choice. Well, they decided they were not going to do it. And they didn't have enough faith, they didn't want to take the risk. Because we got a system, it's kind of a cruddy system, but we'll patch it up, we'll make it work, and we just don't want to take the risk that you might be able to get the job done. I think you have to be a bit of a risk taker. You're not going to get very far if you don't take some kind of risks. Yes, they have to be mitigated, they have to be measured, you have to understand, you know, what the pluses and minuses are. I did some work for Greyhound Lines, and we were building a staff scheduling system for them, and this is the 3rd time they went out. And they said, why would we trust you? And I said, because I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to ask you to give me a 3-month job where you're going to explain to me how it works. I'm going to develop an algorithm for scheduling staff. So I want to schedule shifts so I can show you for the buses that are coming in and going out, I can develop a shift, and this is the cost of your shifts for the day. And the guy said, okay. And I said, at the end of 3 months, if I cannot develop that schedule, that algorithm, then I'm going to tell you I can't do it. And you better hire a guy from Pizza Hut or something to come in and do it, because I obviously don't know how to do it. But we figured out how to do it, and they agreed that the algorithm was good, and they agreed that what it was pumping out in terms of schedules was good. And there were complex, convoluted rules, and then we went ahead and did the rest of the job. So that's what I call a measured mitigated risk. It's a amount of, you don't want to bring in a team of 20 people and then find out 6 months down the road you got nothing. You bring in somebody to do something that is critical. I mean, you get somebody to write a novel, if the plot sucks, you know the novel's going to be bad. So you want to know what the plot is before you give the guy a contract to write the book. I think listening skills are phenomenally important. A lot of people don't listen. You have to listen. You have to listen to what people are saying, and you have to listen to what they're not saying. Listening skills are exceptionally important. Gotta learn to say no. Now, you might lose your job, but that's a risk you've got to take. You've got to decide when it's going to make life even worse for you and for the clients. So sometimes you just got to say no. And the way I work is, I work with vendors, I work with clients. I like to hold both sides' feet to the fire. Not always for the client, not always for the vendor, but it's got to be a fair proposition. If it's not a good deal both ways, it's not a good deal. And I've been doing it now for, as I said, the better part of 30 years, and I think it's a decent philosophy. I think you have to invest in yourself. I decided some years ago that I was getting bored. I wasn't learning anything new, so I decided to get my master's in policy. And I think it's the most fun that I've ever had, probably in the last 20 years. I cannot believe what a joy it was to go back into the institution. I did it at night, and I did it over 16 months, and I was taking about 9 credits a term, and I was knocking it out, and it was just so much fun, learning new stuff. Because at the end of the day, if you're not having fun, then I think you got to get a different job. One other thing I'd like to leave you with is, as I said, I've been writing stuff, and I decided to write a book on program management. And by program management, the problem is most people think of it like a portfolio of projects. It's really not a portfolio of projects. A program is like let's say you have a welfare program, or you have a stamps program, or you have even a bank card program. It is a program that has, it's got some objectives, it's got some goals, it's got a vision to it. What do you want to achieve as a result of that program? The DNA of a program and the DNA of a project is significantly different. And so I'm calling it the DNA of program management. It's really to talk about when a piece of legislation comes in, like we want to have health, information exchanges. Well, how do you get it going? The legislation will turn it over to one or more departments who will write policy on it, and that policy then has to turn into process, and that process has to turn into who are we going to go out and meet, who are the people that we're going to be dealing with in terms of providers, in terms of customers, in terms of information. And you find that there is a relationship between program management and information management that is very, very tight, and that's why I like this this double helix symbol. And I've written the introduction, I've written the first chapter. These guys at CRC Press appear to have bought into whatever I sold them, and so they're going to give me a year to knock it out. It's what I hope I can then take and teach in business management, MBA, and MPA classes, so I've got something to do once I get tired of running projects, and then I can tell people how to do it, and I don't have to do that hard stuff anymore. So please watch out for it. I hope if you want to look up my stuff, it's at patimes.org. Type my name in the search and you'll see a bunch of articles. It's on a diverse set of topics, but some similar in vein. I'm basically venting and complaining about something or the other, but some of it's interesting reading, so you might enjoy it. That's the pitch. You've been very patient, and I haven't put anybody to sleep yet, but if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to take up questions. If you want to tell me you agree with everything except for the format and the content. I'm okay with that too. I'm willing to take anything you guys have to throw at me. I've got business cards. If you're interested, come and grab one. I think Renee has thoughts of putting it out there somewhere, so you guys have access to it. So turn it over to you guys.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Hi. How are you? Very good presentation.
Thank you.
I've been a software consultant for a long time, and I'm interested in getting into project management. Is it worth it to get away from the application and functional consulting into going into project management?
If you want to go into project management,
Shami, can you repeat the question?
sorry, the question is, he's been a software consultant and he's thinking about going into project management. I would say if you've been doing software consulting for a while, you probably are doing some form of management in any case. You're mentoring other people, you're working with, within a team environment, and you're providing some level of leadership. To go into project management, what I would tell you is never lose the technical edge. Never. Not for any money in the world. Because that will provide food on the table. The PM side may or may not provide food on the table. And the reason for that is because when people hire project managers, they're not, as I said earlier, they're not hiring them based on what they need them to do or what their real capabilities are, because they generally don't take the time to understand it. Some companies do, a lot of them don't. They want to know that you work with Tushras, you work with Coopers or somebody like that, so you have a structure where you know metrics, you have the pizzazz, you've got the walk, you've got the talk, you can do all that stuff. My problem is I don't know if you can get the job done at the end of the day. You have to ask questions. Can you get the job done? So I would certainly encourage you to take project management courses, think about what they're teaching you back to the way business is conducted. Compare that against your experience. Get the certification, because without that, it's a waste of time. Get the certification. You don't necessarily have to do it the way they teach it, because a lot of what they teach is not practical. And I get debates on it every day. I'm willing to take, grief over it. But if you do it the way they teach you in class, it does not work. There is more to it than that. And that's where the experience comes in, and that's where your experience is going to be very helpful in figuring out how to manage a project. I certainly would go for it. But if you are a technical leader, somebody who's an architect leader, somebody who's excels in by being able to do and work with people, and you can grow over time. You can say, okay, I know enough about it that I don't need to learn more, but I would continue to invest on the technical side, because if you have it, then you have a natural ability to learn. So don't give it up, but certainly go after the PM side. It does pay more money, but a very good architect pays good money. It's hard to find. And at the end of the day, it's about enjoying your work and making reasonable money. And so, that's a very personal choice. I don't have a choice. I can't do anything else. This is all I know how. So that's what I do. You tell me to go something technical, and I'm just going to do some arm waving and see if that'll sell. So, yes, sir. Go ahead.
I work for Waterfall, and for the last 4 years or so, our teams have become more globally distributed, like virtual teams.
Yeah.
As of today, I don't see the faces of any of the team members. We just talk on the phone, or we like email exchange, or IM, and so on. So we lost personal contact with any of the team members. So do you think it's good for a project, or has someone done a study like how the projects are going on?
I think the question is, you've got virtual teams, so how does that work? Virtual teams are a given. We're not going to get away from it. Even in my own company, I've got virtual teams, because you can't tell everybody, all right, everybody move to place A, place B, or place C. Some people will, some people won't. Some of the senior management sometimes does because they need to be together. I think it is, you've got teleconferencing, so that's a little helpful. But nothing quite beats sitting with somebody face to face and doing work. There are companies that will bring people around every so often so that you can either work with them in their place or they come to your place, or at least bring some of the key people, because those are the people that you depend on to get the work done. So if I need to get development done as a team of 20 people, I need a team lead or two and be able to meet up with them. And sometimes they bring them in or you go and meet them. And it's, and I can understand if somebody's sitting in India or in China or in Singapore and so on, it's not very easy to make that happen. But I think that's a level of investment that a company has to make in order for their projects to be done well. I'm trying to think, there's one of the articles I wrote was along similar lines. And I think it's just the way of the world and we have to accept it. But if there's a way to bring some people together periodically so you have a meeting of the minds and you kind of understand each other's, you know the way that you all work together, I think that's quite beneficial. But that becomes a company philosophy. You take somebody like IBM, I mean, how are they going to bring all these people together? It's almost an impossibility. So you farm out different pieces and then you say, okay, we'll make all the pieces come together. But then you hope that working on each of their individual pieces, they're well enough defined. And I go back to, is the overall picture defined? You know, did you break it up nicely? Or did you take a wishbone crack it and, you know, somebody's got the bigger half and somebody's got the smaller half? Yes, sir.
You mentioned you created a methodology for a banking company.
Yeah.
So do you believe a company can form to one methodology for all their projects?
A methodology for me is a structure that contains how that company does its work. So one company may work differently than another company, and at the end of the day, you've got a concept, a design, development, and delivery. I mean, those are the four phases, and they apply to just about any methodology. And then they're split up depending on the organization, the staff, how it does its work, and so on. I think there are different life cycles within a company where you've got a quick project, you've got a medium-sized project, and then you have the very large projects. And you can apply the same approach, but you can shorten or lengthen certain things. And you can tailor the methodology to the situation. I don't believe that you take the situation and wedge it into the methodology and warp it out of, you know, because then it's just nonsensical. So I think you have to take the approach and say, how much time do I really need to spend on this? And can I beg, borrow, and steal the components and jam them together and knock it out in 4 months? Or do I need to build it from scratch? And those life cycles are going to be a little bit different. So I think you take the methodology, you adapt it to a situation. That's how I work. Yes, sir.
You touched upon the difficulty of being held accountable for a project, but not necessarily getting the authority. Do you have any tips or tricks for us as to how you've managed to grab the authority on your project?
Well, it's a stylistic thing. That's the best answer I can tell you is it's stylistic because I walk in with an attitude. I walk in with an attitude that says, I'm here to get the job done. Now, maybe I've been doing it long enough, it's written all over my face, I don't know. Somebody told me that you have to annoy people once in a while. where they get really, really annoyed at you. And I'm okay with that because annoying somebody means you're going to get grief. And I'm okay with that. I tell everybody that I'm working on a project with, whenever somebody says, who in God's mind told you to do this, just say that guy. So then all the grief is directed at me. And I'm happy taking it because at the end of the day, you have to work with some of these people. So you cannot get at odds with them. So you create a situation where people believe that you're in control because you've taken control and you've said, if it doesn't work, go ahead, fire me. I don't care. But it becomes an attitudinal thing after a while, and that's not to say that you act like a jerk all the time, but you hold people hard and fast. If I give you work to do and you say you're going to have it done in a couple of weeks, I mean, I'm not going to wait 2 weeks. The book says that a third of the way through, so after about 3 days, I should be saying, if you don't have this much done, then on the 10th day, you're not going to have it done. Well, I'm not going to wait that long. I'm going to find out if you really did understand what you were supposed to do. And if you don't, I'm not going to say, okay, I'm going to cut the cord and, we'll go get somebody else to do your job. I'm going to find out what the problem is. What did you not understand? So I do a lot of mentoring because I was fortunate to get mentoring. I would ask somebody, I'm developing this banking form. How do I know when it's going to be right? And Walter would say, you'll know it's going to be right because you're going to come to me and say, here's the form, I'm done. And I would say, I don't know that I can do that. He says, try it. So I worked on that stupid form for 2 months as a student. And after that, I went to him and said, I don't think you can find a fault with this thing that I've done. And he said, okay, if you tell me that, I'll buy it. I said, you haven't even looked at it. He said, I don't need to look at it. I can see it on your face. So I think a lot of it is just attitudinal. I'm here to deal with it. I'm here to get it done. What is it that you want done? What result are you looking for at the end of the day? I've got conversations going on today, with clients where they're probably after my hide. They're not very happy with me because, we're doing a lot of pushing and pulling. But that's part of the job. If you don't want that to be part of the job, then don't go for that, that work. Then just sit back and let somebody else handle that. But I just think it's attitudinal. You just say, I'm taking care of it, that's it. And people they may not buy it the first time, they may not buy it the second time, but I think if you're resolute, they will buy into it. And I've been doing it for so long, I mean, even the scars have scars at this point, so there's not much choice. If you do your job well, at the end of the day, you say, all I've got to do is just do my job. As long as I do my job, they pay me. I mean, how hard can that be? Like I told my company, we're having so much fun. I said, it seems almost criminal to have fun at the job and get paid at the same time. And they said, well, we can fix that. I said, no, just leave it alone. I'm fine with it. I'm okay with it. Like I say, it's, it should be a crime to have such a good time. Other questions? Yes, sir.
I got a question pertaining to company culture. So I landed at a place where, a nice place, but they have this culture where they attach what's called quarterlies to the project. So for
Okay.
example, an analyst may have their quarterly, the bonus is tied to them completing a certain amount of work for a certain time frame.
Okay.
But from a PM perspective, you look at it and you go like, okay, why should it take 2 months to come up with requirements? And you cannot tell the VA, hey, give me a date. All the required factor is, well, I have 3 months to complete this. So
I would say you've got a situation where you really don't have a very mature project management, because if you've got different skill sets or different groups that are being given work to do, and those are independent of the project, then we really don't have a project. Because as a project manager, I mean, if people are working for me on the project, they're either working for me or they're not. You take a person away from me when they're supposed to be doing my work, we're going to have a problem. That's not to say that's never going to happen. That's not to say that it hasn't happened. But we're going to have a problem because I'm going to get in your face. Because that's my work that you entrusted to me. At that point, I've got to drop it and say, if you take 2 of my 5 critical people off the project, this is not going to happen. And you can't hold me responsible. And I appreciate that people sometimes get caught in situations or in cultures that they cannot control. And, you know, you've got a job, you've got something to do, you're in a situation, and it's not very easy for everybody to chuck it and say, you know, I'm off somewhere else. That's the unfortunate side of the business. And business people and some management are particularly difficult about the corners that they put you in because they're not fair, you know, they're not reasonable. I think the only way I know how to get around those is to take the situation right down to its lowest common denominator and say, let me take my project and lay it out so that you can see all the things that we have to do, and unless I get commitment to these, you know the next level up is not going to happen. How do you suggest I deal with it? Because obviously I need some mentoring from you. I don't know any other way around it, because when I get into those situations, I just take it down, you know, right down to the grain of sand and say, if that's where I have to start, then that's where I'm going to start. You tell me how this thing becomes a dune hill or whatever, because I can't make it happen. You know, some of you guys are running around doing different things. But it is difficult because you're in a company, you have a job, there's a paycheck, you know, you just can't walk out. You know, it's not that simple. And I truly appreciate that. I've been in some god-awful jobs, you know, but in my case, I had a bit of an advantage. I was already in the consulting business. I would say, this thing is going to go away after 4 months. I will be out of this job in 4 months. And then it goes away because I'm going to say, I appreciate it. I thank you very much for the opportunity. I've had something else that has come up. I have to go. And I'm never going to go there again. But it's a problem. There is no easy answer other than take it down to its lowest point and say, show me how this is going to work when I don't have control over these people. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
A question and a comment, because you just said take it to the lowest point, but my strategy is always to take it to the highest point, going back to the stakeholder and talking to them about their vision and their goals, and what is it that they're really trying to accomplish. And if you're at that level, then they have to be assigned the things that they need to have their control.
I'm not debating about the fact that you have to take it to the stakeholder when it comes to decision-making and risk-taking and all those kinds of things. I was responding to a little different need where he's put into a situation where perhaps his department is asking him to manage something in a way where he has no control either over people or resources, and it may not be his call to take it to a sponsor. And if it's his call to take it to a sponsor, absolutely. Take it to the sponsor and say, here's what I've got. But my point is, if you're fighting your own management, then you can't be fighting your management and taking it to the sponsor, because now you're telling tales out of school. You're in a very, very difficult position. And I don't have a way around it other than telling your management that under these rules that you've laid out for me, how can you expect me to do my job? Please help me understand that, because there's something I'm not catching. Am I addressing your question? Okay. But I completely agree with you. I mean, in most of these projects, overarching everything is my steering committee, is the sponsor. And I check the sponsor out as well as I can to find out who's in control, who's going to make the decision, how do I get on side with them so we have a trust factor going, so that when I tell that individual something, they're going to say, okay, he's telling the truth. And that, again, takes time.
And he doesn't have the ability to go straight to his sponsors. He could maybe find somebody else who does have that ability in front of them, and his spokesperson.
Again, as I say, if you're fighting your own management, it becomes really difficult because they pay your salary. If it's outside of that and they're in support of you, then obviously you can do that. But when you're fighting your own management, it becomes really difficult because you're just in an untenable situation where you're biting the hand that feeds you, even though it's not a very good deal. But
would you say that your people skills or your leadership and ability to maneuver those personalities that are on your project team have a great deal to do with getting the project done?
I would say there's a few people that probably don't like my leadership and people skills, but I like to think that I appreciate people for what they do. I have had enough credit given to me in my life that I don't need any more of it. I'm quite happy to turn credit over to whoever's doing the work. And I'm there to make my people look good. I'm there to make my clients look good. Based on that, I'm going to be around, because as long as I can do that, that's why I'm there. I get paid at the end of the day. That's my reward. And yeah, a little attaboy here and there helps. But my style is my style. My style doesn't work for everybody. I tell really bad jokes that, I'm known for telling really rotten jokes. But some clients appreciate them because it's a bit of an icebreaker. I tend to push my clients. I bring them chocolates. I take them to places where they typically don't go, and so they see a side of me that is different than perhaps other people. I'm very comfortable in my skin and in what I do, and you get that over time. And I'm willing to take criticism or critique for what I do, and if I can do it better, I'll do it better. I don't have any problem in saying, boy, snuck out of that one, got real lucky on that one. And sometimes, you just hit the ground hard, you hit the wall hard. If you're going to play the game, you're going to lose every so often. And there have been situations where I don't know that I could have done anything better, but it didn't work out. Somebody really didn't like what I did and can't change their mind. And they say, okay, that was a 6-month gig. I did, you paid, we're done, out of there, on to the next item. That's just how things go. Yes, sir.
What are your thoughts on gold plating?
Gold plating? You mean as in making something look better than it is?
Like if you have a project that's scheduled to run, say 6 months, and you have the capability of getting it done, say in 5 months, in 3 weeks, would you go ahead and deliver it early? Or?
No, I get it done when it gets done. I don't pad the hours, I don't pad the time, because I look at my client's money or my organization's money like it's my money. I don't let either our people or any other organization's people abuse the privilege that we've been given to do something. So if I think it's a bad idea and it shouldn't be done, I'm going to tell them that. If they want me to do it, I'll do it on the basis that it really is a bad idea. If I can get it done in 2 months rather than 6, I'll knock it out in 2 months. Or I'll tell them how to knock it out in 2 months if I can get it done. So I know there are a lot of organizations, and I've worked for them, that are billing because it's billable, not prepared to do it.
I mean, doing the right thing. I'm just saying, like where I got my certification, certificate, I should say. The instructor said that you never complete a project early at the same price without any rewards, or they'll keep on pushing you more for the next time to deliver early?
No, I basically tell them that's when it ended, and the next project that comes along is going to be done on its own merits, and it is what it is. If you think it can be done in 6, I'm going to tell you it's going to take 9. If you don't believe me, fine, I'll lay it out again, down to the lowest level. You tell me what you don't want me to do, but that's how long things are going to take.
So you're going to, like you get it done, let's say you thought you'd get it done in 6, but you actually got it done in 5, it'll still pay you for the 6 months.
It depends. If it's a fixed price deal, then it is what it is. If it's by the hour, I'm still going to get it done in 5 and not collect the extra month, because my expectation is they're going to give me something else. So I'm okay with that. When I started at a particular client's, I started with one project, and I said to my CIO, I said, I'm getting bored. This is slow. I'm used to more work. By the time I ended up, I had 5 or 6 projects worth about $15 million. He's still paying me the same amount of money. Now, I did go to him and say, gee, it would be nice if we could bump it up a little bit. And his explanation to his management was, I can either hire 3 of him, or I can have him do it for an extra 20%. It was an easy sell. But I didn't say I want this money tomorrow. I just said, just bump it up a little. Every year, every 6 to 12 months, if you could do a little better, that'd be great. Keep bringing the work in as long as you're happy with what I'm doing. Then you should have no problem giving me some kind of an escalation. But no, I don't believe in the gold plating as you explained it. That doesn't work for me.
How about one last question? 8 o'clock? No last questions?
Going once?
Going twice? Shami, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.